Good evening, everyone. This is a wonderful celebration, and we are grateful that we can accomplish this event on Gathering Days and by connecting everyone by live stream. We are a large community with a great expanse, and we celebrate that. So wherever you are, know that you are among us tonight. So welcome to the Iliff School of Theology and to this celebration of faculty promotion for Dr. Mark K. George, who is Professor of Bible and Ancient Systems of Thought. Occasions such as this are wonderful in every single way. We celebrate the accomplishments of our beloved colleague. We also celebrate the spirit of faculty, staff, student relationships that create the environment in which our teaching and scholarship thrives. And we celebrate this special place, what it stands for, and the critical role it plays in the world preparing individuals to bring about deep change and address individual and cultural pain. This evening, we are mindful of how our disciplines generate courageous thought leaders and activists. So may this celebration, in all of its many parts, also be the renewal of a blessing of permission to step beyond this place, to live with a passion for our work in the full view of others. Mark, we thank you for how you do that through your gifts of scholarship and teaching, love and compassion. We stand with you this evening in the full joy of your accomplishment and mindful of the promise of all that is yet to come from your work as you present it as a gift to the world. Welcome to everyone.
Good evening and welcome. Mark asked me to say a few remarks about the traditions that are honored in this particular milestone of a faculty member's life. At Iliff, among the ranked tenure-track faculty, we have 4 categories. One can come in as an instructor, which usually means that they have not yet earned their doctorate. We also know that as all but dissertation or all but doctorate. And then we have 3 ranked levels after that: assistant professor, associate professor, and professor. Now, I wish I could tell you that these ranks have some lofty origins in the medieval world, but I can't. Their origins are mostly in the 19th century rise of modern universities in the United States and in Europe, mostly in the United States, actually. So assistant professor is the entry level, or the lowest rung on the tenure track ladder. Usually a person remains at this level for 5 to 7 years, depending on the institution at which they work. They are expected to have a successful record of teaching and service to the school, and beginning a certain level, a certain measure of service to the profession. And of course, there's the domain of publications. Cutting-edge, original work that advances scholarship in the field is highly prized, and even more so for assistant professors who end up being hired at graduate schools. Once a person has passed through the tenure and promotion phase, which is a rather rigorous and, for most of us, a frightening milestone, they move on to the rank of associate professor. And at the associate professor, this is the intermediate level. Some linger there for many years. Hopefully, it is another period of about 5 to 7 years, but there are many people across the United States and Canada who retire at the associate professor level after serving very distinguished careers with excellent teaching evaluations and publications and service to their respective institutions. So it is not necessary, although each institution would prefer for all of their faculty colleagues to reach the milestone that we're honoring here today, that of full professor or professor. And that really is a very significant turning point and milestone in the career of a faculty member. Not only by then will you have had a significant number of publications in peer-reviewed journals, but most usually have 2 or 3 books out by then. And the affirmation is not just an affirmation from the institution at which you are employed. It is an even greater affirmation from the wider profession. And at all of these levels, the promotion involves external reviews as well as internal reviews. But after serving as dean here for 8 years, I find that the promotions to full professor, those reviews that come in from external reviewers, are incredibly interesting, incredibly priceless. And I can honestly tell you that Mark, you kind of knocked it out of the ballpark, buddy. Your external reviewers commented on the sophistication of your theoretical and methodological approach to your field, on the growing interdisciplinary nature of your work, and all 5 of his external reviewers, some of whom were from Europe, indicated his growing stature as an international scholar of significant repute. And you're on your way to Europe in a few days, aren't you? To present your work there with colleagues in Europe. So again, this is just a little bit of an overview of what these ranks mean, but this is the highest pinnacle that a faculty member in North America within these tenure track ranked categories will achieve in his or her career. And we are here today to celebrate a colleague who has done performed above and beyond in all of the categories of evaluation of the Iliff School of Theology. Congratulations, Mark.
Congratulations. I wonder if the external reviewers, did you give them a video loop of terrified students studying throughout the night for his Hebrew Bible exams? Because I feel like that would be really convincing. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children, and talk about them when you're at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Dr. George, you were recommended by the faculty and administration and approved by the Board of Trustees for promotion to the rank of professor. You achieved this position because of your faithful performance of professional responsibilities to the Iliff School of Theology. The faculty appreciates the depth and insightfulness of your scholarship, as well as your engagement as a conversation partner and colleague. The value of your scholarship to your field is well attested by other experts within your specialty. Iliff students and alums appreciate the quality and rigor of your teaching. The entire Iliff community relies on your leadership. You have, without any doubt, earned the recognition accorded by the rank of full professor.
Mark, the Iliff School of Theology is a graduate professional school related to the United Methodist Church. It was established to promote religious and theological studies through which people can prepare for ministry and various forms of religious leadership in the world. Since the opening of Iliff Hall more than a century ago, 125 years ago to be exact, Iliff has affirmed the vision of Bishop Henry White Warren that Iliff, quote, has been established to promote progress in doctrine and experience. In doctrine, it fears no criticism. Courts always an advance. God's thoughts are yet as high above ours as the heavens are above the earth, unquote. As professor of Bible and ancient systems of thought, will you faithfully uphold this historic understanding of the school and its purposes?
I will.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees and the faculty of the Iliff School of Theology, I welcome you, Dr. Mark K. George, to the rank of professor and to the privileges and responsibilities pertaining thereto, and congratulate you on your promotion.
Congratulations again, Mark.
Mark, you can now cast away those dreams of being Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves. You're officially a professor. For some, being a professor means growth. Growth in one's bank account, growth of the ego. But for others, particularly those of us, the exceptional body of professors at various ranks who are not here to be superstars or here to pay for the yacht of our dreams, we know that being professor means that the increase in power, wealth, and influence is commensurate with the extent to which a community of academicians have grown in our ability to see one of our colleagues as more trustworthy, more responsible, and well-equipped to carry out the dutifulness of our shared vocation. We understand that being a professor is a sacred trust. It is a resounding yes, an affirmation of your successful passage through all the filters designed to measure your brilliance, your talents, and dedication, knowing that these filters are ill-equipped to handle your brilliance. However, in the midst of these filters, consider not only what this accomplishment means for our community, who seeks to affirm your scholarship, but seize this moment as a time of self-affirmation. See how this moment is a resounding yes to yourself, the fulfillment of your own vocation, desires, and level of satisfaction. While this accomplishment may very well come with being asked to chair a committee rather than just being a member, being a professor now encourages you to be the Epicurean of sacred texts that you are, without having to acquire a taste that is not your own. It carries with it the responsibility of justice making, of setting and arranging a table where your readers, your students, and your colleagues can gather and dine according to the menu of your choosing. Entrusted now with the care of the menu, that the menu is a part of what brings people to the table, the menu is what creates space at the table, and the extent to which voices can be included and taken seriously, which really is the power and the privilege of making sure that folks stay at the table. It's something we Wesleyan folk like to call growing in grace and in one's capacity to be a means of grace. So to a certain degree, it can be understood, being a professor, as assuming your own priestly role in this part of the divine economy known as the academy. And I am proud to be your colleague. Thank you.
I should have asked to go first. Mark asked me and Michelle to say a few words about what it means to be a full professor. As you have had drilled into you by now, Mark did not just receive tenure. He's had that for a long time. He's had it since his promotion from assistant to associate professor. Mark's promotion to full professor is an institutional and public recognition that he is not, contrary to the caricature of tenure that some in the public have, simply put his feet on his desk and enjoyed his job security since receiving tenure. Mark has used that job security the way it was intended. It's been intended since, and I have to say this, Schleiermacher created the model of the scholar teacher at a modern research university when he founded the University of Berlin. Thank you. Okay. The job security of tenure is necessary, Schleiermacher argued, because scholars doing their jobs correctly often come up with inconvenient truths. Mark has pushed himself as a teacher and as a publishing scholar. Mark has pushed his students, his colleagues, and the field of biblical studies. Promotion to full professor acknowledges this and gives him the stature in academia to ramp up these activities even more. When Jacob Neusner, of blessed memory, one of the most prolific and controversial scholars of our age, was asked why he became involved in so many controversies, his response was, "I think to any person enjoying the privileges of tenure of a university, the question should be asked about not being controversial. I bear my scars and wounds of various controversies as marks of honor and dignity. They show I have done my duty." Mark, keep pushing.
And I get the pleasure of introducing our honoree. I first met Mark in the summer of 1995 when I was part of an impromptu group of faculty interviewing him for a position in Hebrew Bible due to the sudden departure of Kent Richards, a longtime Iliff professor of Bible. There was no time to do a regular search due to this suddenness. David Peterson, who was the senior professor of Hebrew Bible at the time, then had to simply call up directors of doctoral programs to see if they could recommend someone on short notice. Among those he called was Princeton Theological Seminary, and when he called there, they said they had just the guy. Now, if you know anything about Princeton Theological Seminary, you know it occupies a much different place on the theological spectrum than Iliff. Iliff is famously or infamously, depending on your perspective, progressive. Princeton Seminary is proudly conservative. Charles Hodge, who taught at Princeton for nearly 50 years, and by some accounts was the most prominent theologian and biblical scholar of the mid-19th century, once said, "I have never advanced a new idea in this institution." Iliff, on the other hand, wrote into its charter that it shall court every advance in knowledge. The reason Mark's teachers at Princeton recommended Mark as a good fit for Iliff was because he wasn't that good of a fit at Princeton. Sure, they could attest he was a diligent student, his grades were excellent, and his language skills strong, but he was different. And of course, that's not normally the way teachers make recommendations for their students for jobs, but apparently it didn't scare off my senior colleagues at Iliff at all, because, of course, we hired Mark, as today attests, and it turned out to be a very good choice for the institution. Oh yes, and for me too, as it turned out. The real reason Mark was labeled as different at Princeton is because he had become influenced by some important literary critics and philosophers who were really at their peak at the time Mark was in graduate school. Most notably, Michel Foucault. Apparently, nobody at Princeton Seminary was reading this French philosopher, even though Foucault was taking the rest of academe by storm because his work was so revolutionary. So Marc figured out for himself how important the work of Michel Foucault was for biblical studies. And that French philosopher has played a major role in his work ever since. Now, it may seem strange to recount Marc's history as a PhD student and the story of his coming to Iliff when he has accomplished so much since then and when he's about to be installed as a full professor. I do so because it illustrates an enduring quality about Marc that is significant to his identity as a scholar, and that is his deep engagement with theoretical insights from other fields and the integration of these insights into his own fields of biblical studies. Many of us talk about the importance of interdisciplinarity in academe these days, but few of us end up actually practicing it. Marc's scholarship serves as a model to others who have such aspirations. Perhaps the best example of Marc's scholarship is his book, Israel's Tabernacle as Social Space. In this book, he drew from critical spatial studies and human geography in order to reveal, among other things, the mystery of why Exodus has so many chapters on the production and building of the tabernacle. So if you want that mystery solved, you should read the book. The book was reviewed by notable scholars in some of the most prestigious academic journals, and their comments indicate that it is not just his friends and students who rave about his work. One reviewer wrote, quote, "George's book is an exemplary work of interdisciplinary biblical studies," end quote. Another wrote, quote, "George's focus on the social production of space is groundbreaking and creative," end quote. And one other, quote, "a helpful and thought-provoking way of looking at these very detailed texts to reveal the nature of the wood rather than wandering around in the trees." Regarding Marc's contribution to the Oxford Encyclopedia of the Bible and the Arts, that contribution was on something called aniconism, that is to say, the obsession Jews, Christians, and Muslims have with representations of God. Another senior scholar wrote, "It is well-conceived, wide-ranging, clearly articulated, and hugely helpful," which is not often said of academic articles, by the way, "plainly the result of a considerable investment of time and energy." In addition to his publications, Marc has become a leader in the academic guild when it comes to engaging critical space theory into biblical studies and history of religion. He is the founder of the Space, Place, and Lived Experience in Antiquity group of the Society of Biblical Literature, our major professional guild for biblical scholars. And that has enabled a kind of collective scholarly conversation that leads to advancement in new areas of research using interdisciplinary ways of study like critical spatiality. And that group is still growing strong 10 years later. If you don't know anything about the field of biblical studies, most of its practitioners work within an enclosed enclave where newbies and senior scholars alike publish whole books on a single word in a single verse. There's even lots of technical terms for this, by the way. To say biblical studies has traditionally held a narrow scholarly purview would be something of an understatement. That Marc has advanced several new ideas in his research and teaching might mark him as a heretic in some circles, but in the view of colleagues at Iliff, as well as many other scholars in the forefront of biblical studies in the US and Europe, it is what marks him a scholar of international stature, much deserving of the title professor. Congratulations, Marc.
I describe being in academic garbs as dressing in drag, and it's hot. so I'm going to lose the hat. Thank you, Pam, for that introduction. It seems to me that an occasion like this is a time to say thank you and to express my sense of gratitude to a number of people. I want to thank all of you for coming today and to making this such a special occasion for me. It means more than I can say to have you here as part of this service. And particularly, I have friends and colleagues here that have been here from the time I got here. Bill Dean is here today, and he and I joined the faculty at the same time in 1996. So this means a great deal to me. More specifically, I want to thank all of the participants in the service, President Wolf, Kim Patmore, Dean Hernandez, Reverend Bowles-Weber, Doctors Michelle Watkins and Ted Weil, and of course Pam, and I will say a bit more about my thanks for Pam in a moment. I also want to say thank you to Dean of the Chapel, Kathy Kelsey, Betsy Lay, the administrative assistant in the Dean's office, Daryl Walker for stepping in at the last minute and providing some music for us. I really put him on the spot, and I can't apologize enough for the late notice, but I appreciate the wonders that you've done. The staff who are setting up the IT department, this has put a burden on Michael Hemingway and the IT department because they don't normally stream things like this live, and my request put them in a bit of a bind. And I'll just put in a plug. If you'd like to see more of this online, maybe you can talk to David Worley and fund something for us to do that. They didn't put me up to this, truthfully. I also just want to acknowledge that the process, it takes a year to go through the review process to become either tenured or a professor. And there are many people that are involved in that, and I'm mindful of all of them, from the Faculty Personnel Committee at ILIF, which is 4 faculty members who are responsible to read and review everything and to ask 5 scholars across the country and the world to respond, and student responses and internal responses. They write a recommendation. It goes to the dean, who writes a recommendation, who goes to the president, who writes a recommendation. It goes to the Academic Affairs Committee of the board, which makes a decision, which presents to the board. Thank you, all of you, for that. I've been reflecting about this stage in my professional life and the journey that I've been on, and there are many, many people I wish I could say thank you to. Sorry, I'm a bit verklempt. To talk amongst yourselves. There are too many to name, but I do want to note my faculty colleagues who have shaped me in ways that they will never know, who have made me think in new ways, the faculty both here today, the faculty who have been with me over the years, the faculty who have yet to join in this journey. I'm grateful for all of you. I thank you for coming to this event and for your support over the years, your criticisms over the years, the ways in which you have helped me to be a better scholar and a better person along the way. And I would be remiss not to thank my students. 20 years of students have really fundamentally changed the way in which I think, the way I teach, the way I view the world, the way I understand the world, the way I understand myself within it. Thank you. Finally, let me say I'm grateful to have my family here today. Not all of my family, unfortunately. My parents live in Virginia. They're elderly, and they were unable to make the journey here. They are, as I understand it, live streaming this. So hello in Virginia. I'm really touched and feel supported by you, and I love you more than I can say. My son Quinn and his girlfriend Kathleen are here. My other son Ryan is here. He's going to graduate from the University of Denver in a few weeks, so we're looking forward to that too. And finally, I want to say my thanks to my colleague and my spouse, Pamela Eisenbaum. Yes, this has worked out well for me also. I think for some people, they think we have these lovely, wonderful, scholarly conversations at home. And yeah, sometimes we do. And then it's like, who's going to take out the trash? And do I have to go mow the lawn? What are you going to go do? It's the reality of human life. I think that's enough. But again, thank you. Now, if this works. Hooray. Oh, and I have to do one more thing. I have to keep time of myself. This afternoon, I want to share with you a bit of the research I've been doing this year on sabbatical, because I have been on sabbatical. I'm writing a book titled Deuteronomy's Subject, about how Israel is created in this particular book, Deuteronomy, as a particular type of subject. One of the things that I keep thinking about in this project is the relationship between people and books, or more generally, people and writing. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt here. I think I'd like the platform part if you could either, take a seat around here so you don't have to twist yourself into a noodle to see the screen. And I'll take a drink of water. So I've been thinking about this relationship between people and books and people and writing. And there's a phrase from the Quran that captures something of this relationship for me. That phrase is, the people of the book. Some of us may know this phrase because it is used from time to time to refer to the three monotheistic religions that share the Bible: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This is a rather more expansive use of the phrase from the Quran, where the phrase, and pardon my Arabic pronunciation, al-Kitab, refers to three peoples: Jews, Christians, and Sabaeans. We could do a test to see if you know Sabaeans, but probably not, because I didn't. I had to look it up. The Sabaeans were people living in the region of Babylon. But these three people all have monotheistic religions and share the use of the Bible, or at least certain sections of it. I find it to be an evocative and rich phrase because the idea of the people of the book is so puzzling to me. What does it mean to be people of the book? Doesn't that strike you as strange? To be people of a book, or more specifically, to be people of the book, the Bible. What does this mean? How do people become people of the book, of something written? These are big questions, and there are many ways to try and address them. One way is in terms of the rhetoric of the Bible. It can be quite persuasive and compelling, something I think the cover image of the program captures, with the command, "Read me." This persuasive rhetoric is evident in the passage that Nadia read earlier, which is referred to as the Shema, the Hebrew term for hear, because of the first words, "Hear, O Israel." It gets your attention, commands you to listen, requires you to decide if you will listen and obey. So rhetoric is one way in which individuals become people of the book. Tradition and custom are another. We accept the authority of the Bible because of our religion or religious tradition. This may be because of a particular community, or, as in my case, your family instills in you the authority of the Bible. It is canon, that is the measure or rule of faith and life. I know there are many other ways to answer this question of how people become people of the book, but today I want to think about how the book itself participates in this process. I will use Deuteronomy as my example. Surprise! My argument is this, that Deuteronomy makes readers into Israel by making them subject to the book and its authority. Now, to refresh your memory about Deuteronomy, in case you're a little shady on this, Deuteronomy is the fourth book of the Pentateuch, those first 5 books. It's the fifth book of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. It is a book of commands placed upon Israel, and these commands tell individuals and tell us as readers who and what it means to be Israel. Eat these foods, not those. Worship at this chosen place, not anywhere else. Live in this land, this region, not another region. Have one set of weights and measures, not two. I'll come back to that. Put tassels on your clothes. Have this as your history and these as your ancestors, not others. An individual becomes part of Israel by observing the commands. Doing so is an act of obedience to the book, of accepting its authority as a book. Most people will say, no, Mark, you're wrong here. This is obedience to God. But God's speaking through the book. Deuteronomy is the norm for what it means to be Israel, at least as Deuteronomy understands things. As such, Deuteronomy tells the truth of Israel, is the truth of Israel in book form. It is the truth book of Israel, what I call veriscription, truth writing. Pam constantly reminds me that I'm a big idea guy, and today is really no different. But since time is relatively short, unless you would like me to do a 10-part lecture series, I'll only sketch the outlines of my explanation. So first, I'll begin with the transition from oral culture to written culture and how that shift is noted in the Bible. The prophet Isaiah, this is Michelangelo's representation, and Deuteronomy both contribute to the shift from oral to written culture. Next, I will discuss how books come to play a normative social function in Israel. Then I will give 2 examples of the actions Deuteronomy demands of its readers if they want to become Israel and thus people of the book. Such actions are the practical means by which this process occurs. And in conclusion, I will say a few things about why I think this topic is important for today and the technological world in which we live. My hope is that when I am finished, we will think at least a little bit differently about our relationship with writing, texts, books, and the book. We all live in a book world, or at least we used to live in a book world since technology rapidly is displacing it. But even if printed books are waning, books remain, as do writing and texts more generally. Indeed, in this age of technology, we are surrounded by writing and texts, practically bombarded by them. If we think for a moment about books, we now have, in addition to print books, electronic books, digitized books, books as PDFs, audio books, and even digital Bibles that let you have your Bible your way. Text, audio, visual, share it with people. If you don't know the Bible.com app, you can have the Bible your way. If we expand our view to writing and text more generally, the list is much, much longer. In addition to snail mail, junk mail, and print media, there's email and junk mail, digital media, digital news, and an ever-growing list of social media. And so far, I'm only thinking about writing and texts. Because most of us have lived our entire lives in this world of writing books and texts, we might assume that using them and living our lives in relation to them is natural. But there are alternatives, both now and in the past. Books and writing do not rule the entire world. Oral cultures survive and thrive without written texts. These cultures are quite capable of preserving and transmitting to individuals and communities who they are by speech and song alone. This was true for Israel too, since scholars widely agree that an oral tradition lies behind many of the texts of the Bible. So writing and books are not inevitable for Israel's social development. Becoming people of the book was the result of an historical process. When writing began to be used in the ancient world, it largely was reserved for scribes and other elites who used it for administrative and political purposes. Scribes wrote tax receipts. This is a hand copy of the Samaria Ostraca, which are tax receipts. And then we have a script chart here. They wrote monumental inscriptions, as this black obelisk you can see in the British Museum is a monumental type of inscription from Neo-Assyria. They wrote letters and other bureaucratic documents for the royal court. Over time, writing became more common and decentralized. We have an image here of the Ketef Hinnom silver amulets, these two small amulets that were found that have writing on them that comes from the book of Numbers and is known as the priestly blessing. We also have this, the Siloam Tunnel inscription, which is from the 8th to the 7th centuries BCE. We're not exactly sure. It's found in a tunnel, a water tunnel, in the city of Jerusalem, and apparently was inscribed in stone by the miners who were digging the tunnel, not by scribes. And it says something about, we heard the chisels from the other side because they worked at it from two directions in order to build the water tunnel. It suggests, this inscription suggests, writing no longer is the exclusive preserve of scribes and kings. This is not yet advanced literacy, or what I'll call advanced literacy, of the sort needed to produce a book like Deuteronomy. But writing and the production of texts is spreading. There are many reasons for this, not the least of which are technical advances. The development of the alphabet, this is the Hebrew alphabet, is one such technological breakthrough. Rather than having to learn a complicated cuneiform script, this is a boundary marker from the Neo-Assyrian period, and there's Akkadian down at the bottom, these little golf tee wedgies. That's cuneiform, and these are syllabic sounds. So rather than having to learn all of these signs, or hieroglyphics, as you have in Egypt, you only have to learn the alphabet. 22 letters, 22 graphical marks, and you can write whatever you can say or think. There's some education required to that, but it's the general idea. Other technologies must be available, like pens and ink and parchment and all those things. And that's a fascinating history, but if you want to know more, I suggest you talk to Pam Eisenbaum, who is becoming expert on these things. So what does writing do that oral tradition cannot? How do books, or more specifically, how does the Bible, displace oral tradition and culture? It's a slow process, but the Bible provides some suggestions about how it happens in Israel. The 8th century prophet Isaiah had a rather rough go of things. Despite his status as a prophet, people in Israel, especially the king, didn't listen to him. Early in his career and in apparent frustration, Isaiah says, "Bind up the testimony, seal the teaching among my disciples. I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him." This is the earliest mention in the Bible of a prophet writing down his oracles. They normally spoke them in a town square or to the person who is the recipient of the divine message. We refer to them as oracles, and they were usually fairly short, certainly not as long as this address. Not only are they written down, that is, Isaiah has these written down, they are bound up, sealed, and stored with his disciples. Why? Well, because he wants to prove that he is a true prophet of God. How does he do this? Through writing. Writing transforms his spoken words because now they can be used in a new way. They are a record of what the prophet said before it happens. Isaiah's words have not changed, only the medium by which they are expressed and remembered. This new medium, writing, allows a different sort of social function or action to be undertaken. The written record serves as testimony, evidence of the truth of Isaiah. At a later date, they can be located, unsealed, unbound, read, and compared with events that have happened. And then a judgment can be made about Isaiah and whether or not he is a true prophet of God. The writings provide an accurate account of what Isaiah said and thus become the standard against which his status as prophet is compared. Deuteronomy represents a new and different role for writing and the book. Scholars think Deuteronomy comes from the 6th century BCE, some 200 years after Isaiah. What is different here when compared with Isaiah is that this book is stored in a special place, the Ark of the Covenant. We don't have this. The Indiana Jones movie, right, is famously looking for it. It's not in a warehouse in Washington. these are different artists' representations because the descriptions are pretty detailed in the book of Exodus. The book is stored in the ark and is read aloud every 7th year to the people. This text is not sealed and stored for some unspecified future date, but it does come with operating instructions. Read me every 7th year. Moses commanded the priests and the elders, every 7th year, in the scheduled year of remission, during the festival of booths, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, you shall read this Torah before all Israel in their hearing. Operating instructions. More interesting, at least to me, is that the book is self-referential. Several times references are made in Deuteronomy to Deuteronomy. And it refers to Deuteronomy as this Torah, or this teaching, HaTorah Hazot. A phrase that is used in the Bible only twice outside of Deuteronomy. This suggests a critical awareness of writing in the book and its relationship with its readers and listeners. It also comes with a warning label. Don't change the text. You must neither add anything to what I command you, nor take away anything from it. Do not add to it or take anything from it. It also says, don't deviate from what the book tells you to do. You shall not turn to the right or to the left. You must follow exactly the path that the Lord your God has commanded you. Yes, sir. This is a different role for writing and books than what we saw in Isaiah, but what is it? In recent years, scholars have argued these examples from Isaiah and Deuteronomy are evidence both of Hebrew developing as a written language and of the formation of the Bible as a book. What hasn't been considered, at least that I've found in my research, is what social function writing and books serve. How do writing and books become authoritative? How do people become subjects of books? I think it is because of what books do and what they want. There are many things that books do, but let me name only two today. One is to provide testimony and evidence, as in the case of Isaiah. They record and are a record. This allows writing to be used in juridical contexts in order to determine the truth about someone or something. In the case of Isaiah, determining if he is a true prophet of God is achieved by consulting his writings. Check the written words to see if things turned out like he said they would. The writing is the means by which to tell the truth about Isaiah. It provides testimony about Isaiah so that judgment may be made about him and his truth. The other thing books do is standardize and normalize. It's really not as painful as it sounds. Or maybe it is, I don't know. They become the definitive standard or measure against which people are evaluated. Now, this function is related to testimony, but works in a different direction. And let me see if I can explain it this way. If testimony provides evidence of who someone is or what was done, normalization is the standard against which everyone is compared and measured. One, testimony, speaks to who or what you are. The other, the standard or norm, tells you who and what you should be. It is worth recalling that the Bible is canon, that is, the standard or measure of faith and practice. It normalizes. Let me illustrate how this works using Deuteronomy as my example. Deuteronomy contains 4 speeches by Moses addressed to the people known as Israel. According to the narrative, Moses claims his authority on all matters concerning Israel by dint of being their leader for 40 plus years and by being chosen for this role by the deity. Many of his words are those he received from the deity and was instructed to speak to the people. If you're reading the book, he'll say, the word of the Lord came to me and told me to tell you this, and then he'll tell you what the Lord told him to say. So far, so good. These are, however, the same basic claims that can be made about Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, 3 of the other 5 books of the Pentateuch. What sets Deuteronomy apart from them is the self-referential nature of the book. It is not simply a narrative of Israel's ancestors, their exodus from Egypt, their time at Mount Sinai, which in Deuteronomy is Horeb, or their wilderness journey. Those narrative elements do normalize Israel's story. But Deuteronomy does more. But wait, there's more. The claim made in Deuteronomy about Deuteronomy is that it is Torah, this teaching, this instruction. It claims for itself a status unlike that of other books. This teaching on Israel is the definitive one, the standard to be used. It is the one every Israelite should consult. Even the king is to spend his days reading Deuteronomy. I couldn't find a picture of David on his throne, but since there's a footstool, and I imagine kings are about this happy about this command. When the king has taken the throne of his kingdom, he shall have a copy of this law, this Torah, written for him in the presence of the Levitical priests. It shall remain with him, and he shall read in it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, diligently observing all the words of this Torah and these statutes. Wait. I thought being king, I could do pretty much whatever I want. And in the ancient world, that meant I get to go to war, I get to fight battles, I get to have songs sung about me. You want me to sit on my throne and read Torah all day long. That's what Deuteronomy says. Yes, that's what you have to do. Furthermore, the warnings issued in Deuteronomy about how to use this Torah, don't add or subtract, don't turn to the left or the right, makes explicit its status as standard. When it later becomes part of the Pentateuch and then the Bible, its function as standard becomes more generalized and more expansive. What does Deuteronomy do? It becomes the standard for Israel, proclaiming what Israel is and what it should be. It provides a normative definition of what it means to be Israel and an Israelite. Want to know definitively who or what is Israel? Consult Deuteronomy. Want to know how to act like an Israelite? Consult Deuteronomy. Anyone actually, consults Deuteronomy because it is the unchanging standard in written form. Of course, it's idealistic to think the writing is unchanging, hence the warnings. But so too is the book's representation of Israel. But that's how standards and norms work. They set forth the ideal of what you are or can be or should be. Once Deuteronomy becomes the norm for Israel, what does it want? It wants to be obeyed. It wants readers to accept it as the standard or norm for who and what Israel is and to abide by what it says. Is it enough to accept the book of Deuteronomy as a definitive statement about who and what is Israel? Is someone then a person of the book? No. For that, one must perform on oneself. One must undertake to do the actions the book says Israel is to do. If you're going to be Israel, you have to do the things the book calls on you to do. This is how you become a subject of the book and subject to it. The book tells you what to do if you want to be Israel. And when you do, you become part of Israel, at least as Deuteronomy sees things, because you are obedient to the book, someone governed by what it says. In the remaining time, another 15 minutes maybe, I want to give two short examples of what I mean. One example is pretty mundane. The other is central to who and what Israel is as a people of the book. Deuteronomy 25, 13 through 16 reads, "You shall have in your bag 2 kinds of weights, large and small. You shall not have in your bag 2 kinds of weights, large and small. You shall not have in your house 2 kinds of measures, large and small. You shall have only a full and honest weight. You shall have only a full and honest measure. so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such things, all who act disobediently, are abhorrent to the Lord your God. Establishing standards for weights and measures in the ancient world was important. Not sexy, but important. Kings determined standard weights and measures, as suggested by these lion weights from the period of Shalmaneser V of Assyria in the 8th century BCE. Such standards were necessary for the smooth operation of commerce and building, one of the responsibilities of a king. In Colorado, apparently, Governor John Hickenlooper is the one who establishes or at least certifies weights and measures. How many of you looked at the certification seal on the gas pump when you fill up your cars? The governor is there reassuring you that the gallons of gas you're getting are really gallons of gas, of the proper octane and so on. Let's look a bit more closely at this passage, because something different is at work here than simply standardizing weights and measures. Deuteronomy commands you to have a standard weight and measure. It commands that such a weight or measure be full and honest. I can't say that without thinking of being fair and balanced. But how much is full and honest? How much weight is this? How much of a dry measure is this? The text doesn't say. No royal standard for a weight or measure is referenced here, as it is in other texts in the ancient Near East. Nor is a Mosaic standard given. No quantities are stated. What is stated is that no one can have two weights or two measures. If you don't, then it appears you are in compliance with the book's command and standard. Of course, this leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Who decides what is full and honest? Just how much weight or how much of a dry measure is that? What if one person's full and honest is different from another's? In short, if Deuteronomy establishes the standard of behavior, what is being standardized here? In the words of my colleague Jacob Kennard, what is going on here? I think it's compliance with the command. Obedience to the command is more important than what constitutes a full and honest weight or measure. Thus, what is being standardized and normalized is obedience to the command, and through it, to the book. These verses are addressed to a singular you. Hebrew has a way of speaking to you as an individual, a single person, or all of the yous here, sort of a y'all. This is the singular. Deuteronomy seeks obedience from each and every person in Israel who uses weights and measures. How does one demonstrate one's obedience? By having one full and honest weight and one full and honest measure, and using them all the time. And note that this is not a one-off action. Obedience requires the constant, continual observance of this command. Failure to do so results in serious consequences. Those who do not are abhorrent to God. Abhorrence is one of the strongest words for a negative emotional reaction used in the Bible. It connotes loathing towards someone. This is not simply God's nose getting a little bent out of shape. This is God going ballistic. You want to see the mother of all bombs? Really? 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 I've got two weights in my bag, and I'm abhorrent to you? Why? What is it about having two stones in one's bag that merits this divine reaction? I think this is kind of like getting a parking ticket and receiving a life sentence. So what is going on? Two weights or measures signal a failure of obedience. The person who has two weights is refusing to obey the book, refusing to self-regulate and self-govern, and thus comply with the standards set forth by Deuteronomy. As a result, not only will such a person be abhorrent to the deity, that person will lose the promise of long life in the land. That's the good part of this, so that you can have a long life in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Instead, you're going to be abhorrent. Okay, maybe it is like getting a life sentence for a parking ticket. The second example concerns Deuteronomy's repeated calls for readers to remember and not forget the commands of the book. Perhaps the best known of these exhortations is the passage Nadia read earlier, the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, and so on. The slide will help you refresh your memory on this. The Shema is addressed to all Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. It also is addressed to each person in Israel. You, singular, are to do this. You shall love your heart, your sword, your soul, your strength, your might. One and all, Israel collectively and individually is to hear and to perform these particular actions. Love your God with everything you are, your heart, your inner being, your soul. This is an unfortunate translation influenced by the Greeks. The Hebrew term is nephesh, your whole being. You're a psychosomatic whole. So your heart, your whole being and all of your might and strength. Memorize the commands, that is, place them in your heart. Teach them to your children. Recite the commands at home and away, at night and in the morning. Write them out and place them on your hands and forehead, your doorways and gates. Actions pile up in this passage. Memorize, teach, recite, write, bind. These actions, which one performs continuously and without end, are the means by which one becomes a subject of the book, obedient to the book, one of the people of the book, Deuteronomy's Israel. In conclusion, the idea of a people of the book is stranger, I suggest, than it might at first appear. It takes a while to develop as cultures move from orality to writing, or at least for those cultures who make this move. Books perform certain social functions, including offering testimony and establishing standards for who and what a people are. And those early uses of writing continue into the present as the Bible retains its status as canon in Judaism and Christianity. The history of the past, the history of how Deuteronomy came to be, the history of how Deuteronomy refers to itself and wants its readers to become obedient to the book, to become subject to the book, that history of the past influences the history of the present as we continue to use books as authorities in our lives and communities. And it may well influence the history of the future. And this leads me to another set of questions. As print books give way to digital text, I would like to ask, in what ways writing and texts have authority over us now? How do they try to create particular sorts of subjects? People of the what? The computer, Pam says the dissertation, the smartphone? Are we people of Google? Or people of Amazon, or people of Apple, or people of the NSA, or people of something else? What do the texts of this digital age do, and what do they want from us as users? How many of us have checked our phones, read email, sent a tweet, made a Facebook post, played a game, or otherwise interacted with a digital device during this address? You don't have to put up your hands. Michael has. It may be that we no longer are subjects of books, or at least soon won't be, but writing and texts are not going away. How are we becoming people of the digital age, and what sort of people are we? What sorts of digital subjects are we becoming? Thank you. I wish there was Q&A, but I think we should go drink and eat and nosh, and we can talk over that.